My name is Jonathan Pinfolo, and I work as a Digital Financial Inclusion Manager at COMESA Business Council. And on behalf of the CBC Board Chairperson, as well as the Board of Directors, let me welcome you to this second public-private dialogue. And basically, this is just a follow-up of the first public-private dialogue, which was held in Kigali, Rwanda. So this public-private dialogue is being held today in collaboration with AfricaNenda, as well as the Bankers Association of Zambia. So we're basically here to finalize the two key documents in respect to the work which we had started in January this year, and these are the model policy as well as the Rulebook. I have now the pleasure to introduce and invite the COMESA Business Council Chief Executive Officer, Ms. Sandra Wera.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, our honorable guest of honor, the Governor of the Bank of Zambia, Honorable Governor, Mr. Christopher Vunga. I'm representing the COMESA Secretary General, Mrs. Chileshe Kapekwe, being represented here by the Assistant Secretary General of Programs for COMESA, Ambassador Dr. Kipego Cheluget. Recognizing online the COMESA Business Council Chairperson, Mr. Made Venkatasamy, who is tuning in from Mauritius. We welcome you to the meeting. Recognizing the COMESA Business Council Board Director, Dr. Amani Askur, who is here with us physically. She'll be joining us shortly. I'd also like to recognize our national partner, Mr. Herman Kasekende, who is the chairperson of the Bankers Association of Zambia and the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Zambia. We welcome you and thank you for supporting this event. Also recognizing the Chief Executive Officer of the Bankers Association of Zambia, Mr. Leonard Mwanza. It's always a pleasure doing business with you, especially on such a common agenda for the region. I'd also like to recognize the Chief Executive Officer of AfricaNenda. AfricaNenda is a regional partner and sponsor, Dr. Robert Ochola, who I'm sure has joined us online. He's represented here by the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of AfricaNenda, Mr. Akinwale Goodluck. It's a pleasure to have you flying in from Nigeria. Thank you for gracing us in this meeting. Recognizing the central bank governors and regulators and representatives of the central banks who are here virtually, representatives of the Ministries of Finance, representatives of the ICT Regulators, representatives of COMESA Institutions. We also have in this room the president, the chairperson of COMFWIB. This is the Federation of Women in Business in COMESA, and also in her capacity as the chairperson of the Zambia Business Women Association. Welcome, Maureen. Thank you for joining us. We recognize also the captains of industry, our members of the CBC, the commercial banks, the mobile network operators, our manufacturers, SMEs, women in trade, FinTechs, and non-bank operators. We recognize the members of the press. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you find this meeting particularly interesting in driving the regional integration agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, all other protocols observed. Good morning to you all. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our regional partner, AfricaNenda, and our national partner, Bankers Association of Zambia, for the tremendous support to this event. Furthermore, I'd like to thank the COMESA Secretariat for their usual and consistent support towards the private sector inclusion agenda. May I also recognize the stakeholders who are here with us virtually in this space. These are the commercial banks, the IT regulators, mobile network operators, our FinTechs, corporates, and MSMEs from the 9 COMESA countries for their consistency and commitment towards working with the COMESA Business Council in the development of the model policy instrument that informs our agenda today. So on behalf of the CBC board and management, we are grateful for the united vision and commitment towards digital financial inclusion for micro, small, and medium enterprises. I would also like to thank the Gates Foundation for their support towards this agenda, which is aligned towards expanding access to digital financial services so the poorest people around the globe can build security and prosperity for themselves, their families. Expanding intra-Africa trade has generally been esteemed as key to fast-tracking economic growth on the continent. This is one of the main objectives for the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, and it's also within the larger African Union agenda on the Continental Free Trade Area. Digital transformation has also been clearly aligned to this agenda, especially now when industries are seeking to bring back better through innovative economic recovery solutions. But what does this mean for the micro, small, and medium trader operating at a national level? The MSME sector has in the last 3 decades been a prominent source of livelihood through the absorption of disadvantaged groups such as youth, women, and those with different various disabilities. So over 90% of SMEs across sub-Saharan Africa are suffering harsh economic conditions right now. And these are impacts due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many have reported revenue losses of over 50%, largely due to their small size of operations, and also the informality and the concentration in heavily affected sectors. Over 90% of SMEs still plan to maintain or expand their businesses over the next 18 months. So they are very resilient and they believe in themselves. So in line with this goal, over 80% of MSMEs express the need for support, particularly in the area of growth capital, expansion assistance, and digital transformation of their businesses. We've also seen that women-led SMEs are using digital tools at a slightly higher rate than male-led SMEs, and are expressing a greater need for non-financial services for customer base expansion and new product development. So here we're looking at e-commerce platforms and other platforms that can support business and market linkages. Ladies and gentlemen, so today we gather here to consider the Model Digital Common Payments Policy Framework. This policy framework is going to set a foundation on digital payments platforms for MSMEs in COMESA that are interoperable, that talk to each other, and support affordable instant payments across the region. So the deliberations here today will help give concrete content to this objective, and it will also challenge us to give added impetus to our efforts in ensuring that the undeserved communities, particularly women and youth, have access to affordable financial services, and more importantly, that they're included in the formal economic activities of our respective countries. It is our hope that the MSME cross-border trader will be closer to his or her market, improve the quality of sales of goods, and support an ecosystem that effectively boosts intra-trade considerably, which is our common goal as the leaders of Africa. So the integration of payment systems across our markets is very, very relevant. And it's a conversation that needs to be had with an air of collaboration between the banks, mobile network operators, insurance companies, and all the other relevant sectors in this particular market segment. The formal financial channels for cross-border transactions are too expensive for small traders in Africa. And there's little access to cheaper and more efficient formal financial services that can help boost intra-Africa trade. It is my hope that a system like this will definitely facilitate and promote these digital cross-border transactions that will create an inclusive agenda for micro, small, and medium enterprises in the region. So we need to look at, especially in this particular forum, coordination between regulators, mobile network operators, SMEs, and integration of also regulatory systems across our markets, which are both important aspects of cooperation. And they can address some of the problems and challenges that our cross-borders are facing, especially when we're looking to export the African products to African markets and also look at global markets as a very strong competitive field. As a CBC, we look to bring together as many players and regional partners to support this common goal and this common vision of digital financial inclusion for micro, small, and medium enterprises. I thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor and privilege as President of the COMESA Business Council to welcome you all to the official opening of the second CBC-AfricaNenda Digital Financial Inclusion Public-Private Dialogue. This event is the culmination of the enormous collective efforts of consultative stakeholders group herein present. Notable plans and strides for the recovery of our industries in this pandemic period have been made, and as a region, we have always been united by this one great goal: sustainable economic development. Due to the adverse effects that COVID-19 has had in all aspects of our life, we recognize more than ever the critical importance of digital financial inclusion to empowering and transforming the lives of all people, especially the poor, its role in improving national and regional financial stability and integrity, and its essential contribution to strong and inclusive growth in COMESA and more broadly in Africa. Digital financial inclusion and opening our markets for instant, affordable cross-border transaction through instruments such as mobile money and other innovative mechanisms will guarantee inclusion of MSMEs into the commercial space that drives our economies. CBC is best positioned to influence such agenda for a more robust, vibrant, and opportunity-driven market economy. This dialogue maintained objective is to consider and adopt the draft model policy for the digital payments platform for MSMEs in COMESA and the draft guidelines on the operation of the digital payments platform. The deliberations here today will help give concrete content to this objective and challenge us to give added impetus to our efforts in ensuring that the undeserved communities, particularly women and the youth, have access to affordable financial services, and more importantly, that they are included in the formal economic activities of our respective countries. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, digitalization encouragingly is one such pathway that is sure to provide an invaluable opportunity for businesses to leverage the benefits of the recently implemented Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is the ACFTA, and catalyze economic recovery in the region. Promotion of affordable technology enables interventions that can facilitate access to mobile phones can go a long way in enhancing uptake of digital services. Investment in physical infrastructure, such as improved electricity supply, support of software development, and assembly of ICT equipment is equally imperative and will contribute to improve internet connectivity in remote areas and undeserved populations. The CBC Digital Financial Inclusion for SMEs program is one of the regional initiatives catalyzing this agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, we are inspired by the partnership that have developed between the various public and private sector stakeholders group within the regional digital financial inclusive ecosystem. It is in the spirit of this very collaboration that in the past year we reviewed and validated the national policy areas that were agreed upon by 5 sectoral stakeholders work groups to be harmonized at regional level, forming the basis upon which a digital integrated regional common payment scheme for MSMEs is to be developed. Distinguished delegates, we have a huge task ahead of us. The circumstances we are in owing to the pandemic demand that each of us do more in our respective capacities. There is no simple solution to addressing financial exclusion. However, this initiative will undoubtedly greatly complement others in the region that aim to enhance continental trade flows, which is central to our regional integration agenda.
AfricaNenda's objective is to support digital payment deployments and enhance the capacity of key African institutions such as COMESA Business Council. We are particularly proud that we at AfricaNenda, we have an unparalleled commitment to universal financial access for all African adults. Today, we celebrate COMESA Business Council in its laudable objective of implementing a regional digital payment inclusion program that seeks to provide a low-cost, interoperable payment platform to serve micro, small, and medium enterprises. And we're particularly pleased that this program is focused towards supporting women and young and vulnerable stakeholders in the COMESA region. We are grateful for the opportunity to partner with CBC and provide technical support and services in the development of a draft model policy for digital payment platforms for MSMEs in COMESA, and also support the draft guidelines and rulebook on the operations of the digital platform. It is AfricaNenda's sincere hope that together we will be able to foster more innovation and accelerate access to financial services to the bottom of the pyramid. I wish us all a most successful and productive dialogue. Thank you for your time and thank you for your attention.
Guests of honor, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I state that as an association, we share your views on the need for the harmonization of policies, which are underpinned by digital financial inclusion as a regional-wide goal. This undoubtedly will lead to the region having a symbiotic and well-integrated payment system. We are very confident and very hopeful that the needs of the region will be met, but also this initiative will harness the ever-changing innovations and developments in the global space of digitizing financial services. The statistics in Africa are compelling. In essence, for us, we put the number of accounts in Zambia at about, number of bank accounts at about 2 million. Now, this is comparing with mobile money users of about 8 million and active internet users of 5 million. We also recognize the need for harmonized models for a regional financial inclusion framework that delivers all the foundation principles of the digital financial services empowerment of SMEs and women, as indicated above. We believe in the importance of consumer protection and digital financial services. Simply put, it's the treating of customers fairly. On the other hand, technology aspects will need to focus on interoperability policy, stressed by Sandra, that seeks to promote a harmonized, interoperable, integrated digital payment infrastructure and policy framework. There are also cybersecurity concerns for the regional digital common retail payments platform. We also recognize the needs of mobile money guidelines that will seek to address concerns relating to transactional costs on shared infrastructures. In order for all this to be effective, there's need for member states to have harmonized electronic transactions acts to enable consistent verification and authentication of legitimate users of digital platforms. DFS spans the full spectrum of financial services, from payments and current accounts to savings, loans, and investments and insurance. Africa contributed 43% of all the new accounts globally opened. This was mainly enabled by flexible KYC processes approved by regulators. But it's also important to show that a total of 767 billion is the value of the new accounts or on the transactions in 2020, with 65% in Africa. Zambia's financial services industry is poised for a digital revolution, from e-payments in banks to mobile network operators. And the recent expansion of mobile financial services is high and is actually growing tremendously. The number of active customers has grown from about 4.3 to 6.5. Barriers to mobile money use also stem from low levels of consumer capabilities, Improvement of financial education for DFS has become an essential next step to enable both cash, light, and mobile money to expand further and empower the entire population in Zambia. Therefore, an inclusive digital economy needs to connect MSMEs and women to merchants across borders. As an association, we look forward to fruitful engagements that will undoubtedly build synergies for best customer outcomes in the seamless and successful implementation of a regional payment system that is responsive to the market's transactional needs in the entire COMESA region. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you all successful engagements during and beyond this high-level engagement dialogue. Thank you.
Sub-Saharan Africa has experienced commendable progress in financial inclusion, especially in terms of having mobile phone accounts. Digital finance has played a significant role in expanding financial inclusion. Mobile and digital technologies provided by FinTechs and telecoms are increasingly allowing more people at the grassroots level to have access to financial services. And they would not otherwise have been, they would have actually been excluded from the traditional banking system. So mobile money accounts allow users to transfer money, pay for transactions in real time, obtain a loan, pay it back safe. However, all these transactions are carried out at the domestic level. So as COMESA, we would like to see a cross-pollination of these services in interoperable, affordable, and transparency across our regional markets. This will reach into the untapped opportunities for micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, women and youth, to expand beyond their local market shares and enjoy the benefits of going regional. During the COVID-19 pandemic, digital finance has proved very important in reaching the poor in different socioeconomic conditions. So some of the measures implemented in some COMESA member countries that have enhanced digital financial inclusion during the COVID-19 include some of the following. There is also introduction of cash transfers to the poor who have lost jobs and livelihoods. Most countries now have encouraged cashless payments in order to reduce the risk of getting COVID. Some countries have encouraged other non-cash transactions without physical contact, such as contactless cards, mobile wallets, internet banking, and mobile banking, telephone banking, etc. Some regulators have also directed banks and other financial institutions within their jurisdiction to allow loan restructuring or over a moratorium on loan repayments, financial assistance in the form of liquidity transport to the vulnerable small and medium enterprises. Some of these measures have also set the foundation for a keen response mechanism by COMESA member states to create harmonized and balanced regulatory policy frameworks and innovative digital financial solutions that can accelerate transboundary trade for the most affected segments of the population. So regional digital payment solutions for MSMEs needs good regulatory enabling environment that caters for an inclusive, multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral, and hybrid regulatory requirements for smooth implementation to allow for the development of a low-value regional digital payment platform for MSMEs. Today, we have an opportunity to discuss the proposed model, policy framework, and change the policy environment towards the desired direction. There is need to strengthen the existing digital trade facilitation ecosystem that will effectively boost inter-trade considerably.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in COMESA, the data suggests that we are likely to witness an increase of financial inclusion due to policy priority given to the financial inclusion and emergence of technology, such as mobile financial services, which is reducing transaction costs and increasing outreach to MSMEs in the region. Mobile and digital technologies provided by FinTechs and telecommunications companies are increasingly allowing more people to have access to digital financial services who would otherwise be excluded from the traditional banking system. Based on the most recent data from the World Bank, 2018, the COMESA region has experienced faster growth in financial inclusion, surpassing sub-Saharan Africa average. The number of financially included in COMESA has more than doubled in the last decade, from 23% in 2011 to 23% to 32% in 2014, and further to 48% in 2017. Some of the measures that have enhanced financial inclusion during the COVID-19 pandemic in the commercial states include the introduction of cash transfers to the poor through mobile money cash transfers, encouraging cashless payments, and scrapping transaction fees between banks and telcos for values of up to $10. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, financial and ICT regulators at national and regional levels are urged to support this policy initiative, with central banks expected to guide and provide oversight on the policy framework. As you have noticed, the policy framework being discussed today has proposed a number of reforms, introduced new policy measures, and will also lead to amendment of existing legislation, which may require intervention of government agencies. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, going forward, there's need to, one, to encourage digital financial services through public awareness and financial literacy among end users, to consider reducing tariffs on digital services to encourage and increase the number of people and entities using the financial services that are being provided. With these few remarks, it is now my honor and privilege to officially open the digital financial inclusion public-private dialogue and wish everyone a successful and fruitful deliberations. So I thank you all for your kind attention, and God bless you all, and have the stay safe. Thank you.
It's now well established fact that giving low-income households, and particularly women, across the formal financial services can make a critical contribution by reducing poverty and addressing inequality. An enabling environment and regulatory environment is integral to the success of any financial services, including mobile money, irrespective of the country's financial inclusion rate. Policy objectives vary based on unique country attributes such as regulation, technological advancement, availability of financial services, and literacy levels. Governments must also undertake gender-specific research to ensure that digital interventions do not leave the poorest women behind. For women across the region, digital savings, credit, and payment services can provide them with personal empowerment. Hence, we are moving a motion of having harmonized payment policies across our COMESA countries. Over the past years, there have been numerous barriers identified as being central to the women's financial inclusion. These include, number one, the demand side and social norms, lack of bargaining power within the household, concentration in lower paying economic activities, competing demands on women's time related to unpaid domestic work, lack of assets for collateral, lack of formal identification, reduced mobility due to time constraints and social norms, lower rates of mobile phone ownership among women, lower rates of digitalization. The second barrier is about the supply side barriers, inappropriate product offerings, lack of gender-specific policies and practices for product design and marketing, inappropriate distribution channels. COMESA has already thriving mobile money markets are fertile ground for the expansion. The African Union Agenda for a Unified and Integrated Africa, our Africa 2060 Development Agenda of a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa, driven by the citizens of Africa. The cross-border women traders are in need of such policy for the financial inclusion, for the digital payment solution, which will be affordable. How can we operationalize it without a simple digital payment solution, without our leaders, without the regulators, without the central banks adopt this policy for increasing our intra-Africa trade? We need this policy to be adopted in order to operationalize our ACFTA. In order to have a unified and integrated Africa provides a framework for this progress, including harmonized regulations and the Pan-African payment system, which will support trade, economic growth, and development across the continent. The whole 8 RECs, the regional economic blocks, which are the building blocks of the African Union, need to adopt this policy. Us as private sector to come together to see how we have a prosperous Africa that will manage our own resources, that will industrialize our own raw materials, that will have its financial inclusion, that will have our digital payment solution. It's us who can do it. It's an African problem that should be managed by African solutions as us as stakeholders.
Why do we need DFI for MSMEs? Actually, there are quite a number of issues. I think, as the previous speakers have already highlighted, to say that about 80% of the business community is driven by the MSMEs, and this is actually a large number of the population within the region, COMESA, but also even Africa at large. Secondly, we're also looking at factors like, for instance, participation of these MSMEs in national, regional, as well as global trade. So by the end of the day, what we're looking at is to have like reduced transactions when it comes to making payments, but also even the time it takes to do the transaction within the region. It has to be real time. So as for the overview, we did the business case development. This was done, we finished, and we are glad to report that we've done the publication, but also currently we engaged a consultant, Legis Policy Associates, who developed the policy framework, and this is why we are here today to finalize this work. And going forward, we'll be looking at the business model, but also even technical capacity building. So coming to MSME challenges, I think there are quite a number of challenges which have already been highlighted, but I'll not go into this one. And basically, having known those challenges which are there, this is what led us now to do the business case report. So basically, in as far as the business case report, there were 4 key issues that we are focusing on. First was to look at the existing payment infrastructure within the 9 pilot countries, but also to look even at the existing policy frameworks, but also to look at the cost aspects, because most of these MSMEs do have challenges to access platforms because of cost. And finally, we're also looking at how do these MSMEs access various markets, but also how do we facilitate trade within the region. So basically, as for the stakeholders, we met quite a number of stakeholders, and I must say that we had like a total of 16 stakeholder meetings. And as for the groups, we had met financial regulators, ICT regulators, commercial banks, and then banks like MNOs, FinTechs, Microfinance Institutions. But we also met manufacturers, agro-industries, as well as the MSMEs themselves, who are the beneficiaries of that system. So this slide is basically showing you the actual meetings and the specific days. This is as of 2020 last year. And I must say that this year, the last one that we had was the high-level PPT, which has already been highlighted. So going into the major findings, there were 4 of them. The first one, we noted to say that most of these economies are cash dominated. They use cash when it comes to transactions. Very few MSMEs are capable of using digital transactions. Secondly, we also noted to say that there are so many gaps in as far as network infrastructure is concerned. You'll find that maybe in most countries, high-speed data will only be found in the major cities, 4G. If you go into the rural areas, you only find maybe 2G, but also even none at all. And the third aspect was on interoperability, whereby we also noted to say that these MSMEs cannot send money easily, maybe from one channel into another channel, maybe from a mobile phone into a bank account, or from one country into another country. And now the major aspect was also to do with the regulatory framework, whereby we noted to say that there's a need to review the existing regulatory framework policies within the region. When we were doing the study, we noted to say that there are 23 digital policies, but in other countries they'll be available, in other countries they'll not be available. Hence, we had to come up with those 8 key policies. So as a business case, we had 4 recommendations. So the first one was to come up with a regional policy that will support digital MSMEs. That's number 1. But also number 2, we're looking at the aspect of real-time payments. We don't want these MSMEs to take time when they are buying merchandise. Like for instance, I'm here in Zambia, I want to buy something in Rwanda. I don't have to take 2 days to facilitate my payment. It has to be real time there and then. But also the other aspect was to do with deliberate programs. How do we empower these MSMEs to access these platforms? We noted to say that most of these MSMEs don't have capacity. They don't have the required skills. And also finally, standards was one big issue, because by the end of the day, we cannot talk about payments if there's no trade taking place. So the founding block has to be payments.
So in short, what is this session trying to solve for? 1, increased access to digital financial services by harnessing innovations, e.g. use of cloud computing. 2, the reduction of transaction costs, especially for the poor or the most vulnerable, the women and the MSMEs in our communities. And 3, the boosting of trust in the digital financial services by that trust by the most vulnerable in our communities. Examine the suitability of existing legislation that govern payment systems in the member states that can facilitate implementation of the digital payment platform to consider for harmonization. Back to you.
So we are looking at the model policy framework itself, but also even the rulebook. And these are the 5 key policy areas for harmonization in as far as ICT is concerned.
My name is Matthew Mtumbuka, CEO of Bonnet Alliance. We provide internet to universities in Eastern and Southern Africa, 26 countries. Prior to that, I was with the Airtel for 8 years, Malawi, Rwanda, and the head office in Nairobi. My contributions are 5. One is that to accelerate the access and the usage, I think we need to be sure that we have some guidelines on design of the online payments so that they are intuitive for the users. Secondly, we need to have a very good focus on user awareness in terms of being able to use, especially for those who are illiterate, but also for them not to be defrauded, and I'll come back to that. Thirdly, I think the cost, you've talked about one of the impediments being the cost of transactions, but also there's the cost of devices, especially smartphones in this case. Most of the smartphones in the region start from $50 to $100 for the cheap end ones. I think we need to bring down to $20 or $30 smartphones. So we need to work with the suppliers as well if we want to expand this really. And then number 4 is we need tailor-made mobile bundles for online payments. We do already have mobile companies having tailor-made bundles for WhatsApp, for Facebook. In this case, I think we need to have tailor-made bundles for payments as well, so that it's cheap to use. I think we should work with the telcos. And then number 5 is on fraud. What I see in the market is that there's a lot of fraud on mobile money and mobile payments, etc., but it's left to the users. Most of them are defrauded because of lack of knowledge, or they are not very literate. I think there should be measures for A, early detection of fraud, and B, that when fraud happens, we should be able to sometimes even recoup. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of luck. I think this is a wonderful project. Thank you.
My name is Yusufa. I'm the Secretary General of the Ethiopian Chamber. To what extent will this be binding? This is my first question. My second question is, of course, there is a capacity building program, but I would like to know, in the implementation of ICT and mobile technologies. So what special support will be given to those who are lagging behind? So there is, an implementation activity plan, but I didn't see who the responsible organization is. Some organizations are indicated that can have roles on the capacity building, but I didn't see the Chamber of Commerce indicated in this table. The role of the chambers in capacity building is significant. So as a stakeholder in the capacity building program, because they have the infrastructure, they can also mobilize the private sector. So I think they can have a very significant role. So you can also include the Chamber of Commerce and this membership associations as a capacity building program stakeholders.
My name is Mohammed Helmi. I'm the head of payment systems policies and regulations in the Central Bank of Egypt. I'm having mainly two comments. The first one of them that very short notice to receive court just 5 days prior the event, and of course we trying to do our best in order to fast reviewing the report. And of course, we need a lot of time in order to complete our comments. This is the first one, but initially, the initial review of the report, we noticed that there are some or a lot of comments that have been submitted before by the Central Bank of Egypt and not mitigated yet, or we cannot see that it's reflecting on the current report. The last point that we noticed that the presentation is a little bit sequence different than the report sequence. So if we can just try to match between the report sequence and the presentation sequence in order to track our comments versus the presentation, it will be highly appreciated, of course.
Our next session is on the technology aspects. So over to you, Mr. Muhiz.
Here we have specific policy instruments that we would like you to adopt. And
so from the 4 policy blocks, the main policy blocks, the first one is interoperability. As much as possible, we are trying to make the platform inclusive, digital financially inclusive, instant, irrevocable, and as much as possible, low cost. The backbone structure is interoperability. So by doing so, we're going to reduce the prices. The retail payments of each and every member country in COMESA is expected to be compliant with various technologies. Is cybersecurity, member states to enhance existing fraud and crime monitoring and detection frameworks by deploying emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning. Encouraged to develop tailored and continuous capacity building. If we don't train MSMEs how to use the technology, there will be a gap. There will always be a dispute. So to minimize the dispute, we should be able to do capacity building.
Digital ID and a need for federation across different member countries is very critical. Yes, it has to be a digital ID because otherwise we will not be able to have ability to authenticate in a remote session. So that is very key, and I believe this stems off member countries first having their own digital ID as the recommendation states.
Mauritius Central Bank is the central bank or the main central bank that the CTH exists and makes the settlement for the 9 countries. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that intervention, and I think that is noted. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the recommendation is saying that 1 or a number. And of course, the other key premise of some of these policy instruments is not to duplicate efforts where they exist, but rather to ride on what is available and rather make them more efficient and make sure that it achieves the intended objective. If the hope is that by this meeting, if the policy measures are adopted, then of course, incorporating all your comments and views, then they would be put together and submitted to the governors of the central banks in respective countries.
My name is Wouter Utzinger. I'm from DPO, Direct Payment Online, operating out of Kenya as a payment service provider, registered in 20 countries across Africa. So what I was saying is that the policies proposed are going in the right direction. I think they're good. I think there's a lot of ground that we have to catch up. So all these policies are good once we have established businesses which are going to trade. However, the slow pace at which we are allowing these people to register, in some countries, it's taken us 2 years to get approval from the central bank to process digital transaction or e-commerce transactions for these traders. We are offering traders free e-commerce services, free e-commerce websites. So we are trying to enable, at almost no cost, financial inclusion of small traders, of small businesses. But we are struggling to get licenses from the central regulators. It's all very well to have all these fantastic policies, but if there's nobody trading that are going to fall under these policies, then that also doesn't help us. Licensing of different services that supports digital business, that there should be a much faster path. So I do think we need to look at the groundwork and how we are trying to enable this digital business. Thank you.
Thank you, Wouter, for those comments, and I think those are noted and they will be made sure that they are shared across to the respective areas where they are needed. Taxing digital services disincentivizes the uptake. Because if you start taxing them, then it means the prices are going to go high. It's going to make it more costly for especially the targeted market that we're talking about here, the MSMEs and the bottom of the pyramid business operators. We would rather encourage and incentivize uptake of digital services.
We have seen governments across sub-Saharan Africa have started to impose taxes on mobile money transactions. I think that this will ultimately have a most unintended consequence on the promotion and the adoption of mobile money services. We're seeing taxes on digital services and also taxes on mobile money. In some jurisdictions, the taxes are not only flat, but they're also pegged on the value of the transaction. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it really, it's an area that still needs a little bit of study that really to be able to inform some of the these instruments and decisions that we're putting in place. So with that, I want to call for adoption. If maybe secondment and another secondment for adoption of the policy measures that have been presented.
I think Bankers Association of Zambia had a key input in terms of actually giving us two important aspects of what we should be looking at. I think keywords that were mentioned by the BAS chairman was looking at integration and collaboration as the next keywords that we'll be looking at in terms of our focus for the coming years. So I think that's one thing that we should be looking at as players, industry players. Our key focus in looking at driving financial inclusion should be focused on integration and collaboration. And as such, all the industry players, the banks, mobile money operators, payment services providers, all have to adopt that mindset of being complementary and not competing. It's that will actually drive financial inclusion forward, because I think once we have that as as a key takeout, be able to drive financial inclusion. As we come into the final session, which is focused into the regional digital common payment policy for MSMEs.
So in collaboration with AfricaNenda, we'll do some type of capacity building. Between now and December, we're also looking at doing the capacity building for 5 countries. So we shall carry out the literacy training, and we shall also develop some modules which shall help the MSMEs. The other aspect, we're going to also upgrade to strengthen our business data, and this will expand the business and market intelligence platform that will include information on targeted value chains or even various products and commodities as well. So basically, this business model as well as the policy framework now is expected to guide the development of the business model now on the operation as well as implementation of the regional retail payment scheme. And this is work which is about to start next month.
The morning has been full. We've listened to keywords, expanding access to digital finance for MSMEs. We've listened and heard how there's a higher usage of digital tools by women than men, and how digital financial inclusion will create affordable financial services for MSMEs, and particularly for women and young people. Digital financial inclusion, ladies and gentlemen, will address so many challenges that we've been tabling that have been affecting women cross-border traders. I think it's notable, CEO, that this high-level policy dialogue has actually brought together not only the demand side, which is our constituents as women in business, but also the supply side and the regulators. It's important for us to reach the targeted beneficiaries. They need to get this information. So as we create the action plans, CBC, I think we need to consider creating platforms for dialogue between the financial service providers and us, the end users, the targeted beneficiaries of these interventions that you are working so hard to create.
Very brief closing remarks from me. One thing I'd like to say is that the work that has continued today is a follow-on of the work from Kigali. And it's really clear that when you invest in something, you will get the results that you want. The work that has been done today and by the people at CBC working with all their partners is the right example for the rest of Africa to follow in terms of delivering a payment system that meets the requirements of micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, and of course our most vulnerable subsets of the population. The product that has been discussed extensively today is a level 1 principle compliant. It addresses the issues around interoperability. It is pro-core. It recognizes, and I see also from a lot of the comments, the need for a lot of emphasis on both financial and digital literacy, sensitization, and campaigns. It also looks at cost and what the implications are for reducing cost. It talks about cooperation, it talks about competition, both being very strong levers for reducing cost. It also talks about the removal of barriers. And I think that most importantly, to bring it all home, what I have seen this morning and what has driven AfricaNenda to seek a strong partnership with CBC is the recognition of the role that the different parties will play. So we see, one, a clamor for more digital infrastructure deployment across Africa. We recognize that if we're able to deploy digital infrastructure, we can then drive internet adoption. We also see that from the interest generated in the room and the comments, people have spoken extensively about digital identity and the role that digital identity will play in helping to support, drive, and enable financial inclusion. I think it is only when we get all these building blocks right and we can then move to participation in the digital economy. So everything that we have spoken about today will facilitate the participation by everybody in Africa in the digital economy. If we get all Africans working and participating in the digital economy, then we can start to work towards poverty eradication, less social unrest, lifting our people out of poverty, and ultimately help ensure that Africa can deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you very much. And it's been a real pleasure for me being in Lusaka today.
It has been a great pleasure having you all discussing this very important of financial inclusion and our digital financial inclusion for our small, medium enterprises and micro enterprises that constitutes more than 95% of our African continent. This is an address for all of you, the policymakers, the central banks, our partners, our stakeholders, our policymakers, to make this a reality, to make this dialogue, the private-public dialogue, reality, and adopt this policy, because as you have seen, and with all the comments and the presentations, how it will really benefit all our MSMEs across the continent, how it will increase the cross-border trade, how it will personalize the ACFTA. And I always say this is the whole issue of the triad of empowerment, the three pillars: the people, the policy, and the product. I believe that our integration together is about all the stakeholders coming together as private sector, as Africa Business Council, as Confederation of Women Business, as COMESA Business Council, which is, for me, I was the chair for 2 terms. Under my leadership, we started this simple digital payment solution. How can a woman, rural areas in one part of COMESA have trade with another woman and another trader across the whole continent? This is your financial inclusion digital policy. This is our solution. And I would like to thank everybody. And I declare this meeting closed. And thank you very much.